I sit in my office on the 42nd floor of a glass tower in downtown Houston, where the roar of the city below feels like nothing more than a distant murmur. The late afternoon sun filters through the sheer blinds, casting golden streaks across the polished walnut desk where I'm holding the latest issue of Forbes. The cover features me. Theodore Adams, 36, the hedge fund titan currently shaking up the financial markets. The headline screams in bold, "The man shaking Wall Street, Theodore Adams and the investment revolution." I give a half smile and flip through the glossy pages. The article hails me as a strategic genius who turns high-risk bets into pure gold. They call me Houston's uncrowned king, the man who makes the old giants tremble. Yet deep inside, there's an emptiness. Does this success really belong to me? Or is it just a polished shell hiding the scars of the past? I set the magazine down, lean back in the leather chair and stare out the window. Far below, rivers of cars crawl through the streets as people rush home after a long day. And me? What is home to me? Nothing but a cold penthouse where I catch a few hours of sleep before diving back into the grind. At that exact moment, my phone rings, slicing through my thoughts. The screen reads, "Kenneth Adams, my father." My heart skips a beat. How long has it been since we actually talked? I can't even remember. The rare calls have always been nothing more than curt pleasantries. I take a deep breath and answer. His familiar, deep, commanding voice comes through, but today it sounds more urgent than usual. "Theodore, it's Dad. How have you been, son?" "I'm fine," I reply, keeping my tone even. "What's going on?" He hesitates for a second, then cuts straight to the point. "This weekend, come home for a family gathering. We have something important to discuss. You are not to miss it. Understood?" A family gathering? I almost scoff. Our family has never been a real family. But his tone isn't an invitation, it's an order. "What's so important?" I probe. "Just come. You'll find out when you're here. No more questions. 6 p.m. sharp." He hangs up without a goodbye. I grip the phone so hard my nails dig into my palm. My eyes darken as I stare at the blank screen. No joy at hearing his voice after all these years. No surprise at the sudden call. Only a heavy suspicion settling in my chest. Kenneth Adams only ever calls when he needs something from me. Always has. Not for birthdays, not for graduations, never just to check in. Only when the company is in trouble or he needs my signature on some family asset document. I stand and walk to the window, looking down at the frantic ants of humanity below. My pulse quickens. Something is happening. It has to be Adams Energy, Dad's company. I've heard whispers about the energy markets, but I haven't dug in. Now my instincts scream that I need to act fast. I return to the desk and dial Monica, my razor-sharp CFO who's been with me through every war. "Monica, I need a full financial deep dive on Adams Energy. Right now. Leave nothing out." She's surprised but doesn't pry. "On it, boss. I'll pull the whole team. Report in 48 hours. "Thank you." And keep it completely quiet. 2 days later, her email lands. Subject line, "Adams Energy Report." I open it, heart pounding. Charts, numbers, brutal details. Adams Energy is bleeding liquidity. Shareholders are dumping stock in a panic. The price is in free fall. Creditors are preparing to liquidate debt at fire sale prices just to cut losses. Investors are pulling out en masse. No faith left in management. Bankruptcy is months away, maybe weeks if the market keeps tanking. I read it again, fingers clenched around the mouse. Not good news, but not a shock either. My father is a stubborn, old-school CEO clinging to traditional oil while the world pivots to green energy. Poor management, outdated vision. That's the cause. Yet I know Adams Energy still has massive underlying value, remaining oil fields, government contracts, strategic locations. With proper restructuring, it could rise from the ashes. I don't hesitate. I call legal and finance. Use shell entities. Start scooping up distressed debt and dumped shares. Prices are rock bottom. Don't miss this. Move fast, move silent. They execute. In 3 days, through a web of discrete transactions, we acquire 32% of Adams Energy's equity and 100% of its outstanding debt. I am now not only the largest shareholder, I am also the biggest creditor. I hold all the cards. I sit in the darkened office as night falls over the city, its lights glittering below like scattered diamonds. A thrill rises in my chest. This weekend is no longer a family gathering. It's the opening move in a confrontation. What does my father want from me? Money? A bailout? Or just to use me again? I clench my fists, excitement laced with unease. My fate could change from this moment on. I am ready. On Saturday morning, I drove out of the city toward the Houston suburbs, where my parents' mansion sat nestled in the middle of sprawling grounds. The road was familiar, yet every time I took it, I felt like I was returning to a foreign place. I had never truly belonged there. To the outside world, that villa was a symbol of wealth. To me, it was nothing but a cold palace where love had been replaced by money and status. As I turned through the tall iron gates, the sun was already low, painting the sky blood red. I parked in front of the garage, took a deep breath, and stepped out. The front door opened, and there stood my father, Kenneth Adams, 63, CEO of Adams Energy, with a forced, awkward smile. He wore a gray suit, his thinning hair silvered, but his eyes kept scanning me, sizing me up like a business partner rather than a son. "Theodore, long time no see." "Come in, son," he said, giving my shoulder a stiff pat. I nodded and walked inside, instantly sensing the tension in the air. My mother, Paula Adams, appeared from the living room. Ambitious and calculating to her core, she rarely showed genuine warmth. Today she put on a rare display of affection. "My boy, Mom's missed you so much. Come here, let me hug you." She hugged me, but it felt rehearsed, brief, her eyes flicking over me as if appraising my current value. "You look even better in person than in the magazines," she cooed, voice dripping with artificial sweetness. In the dining room, my 2 younger siblings were already waiting. Reuben Adams, my brother, leaned back in his chair with a mixture of disdain and wariness. Since childhood, he had envied my grades, my awards, anything that outshone him. Now, sporting a trimmed beard and a sharp stare, he greeted me with, "Took you long enough to show up." Tessa Adams, my sister, sat beside him, spoiled from birth, dressed in designer clothes, hair perfectly curled. Her eyes held curiosity laced with irritation. "Hi, big brother. Been a while." I took my seat, feeling as though I had walked onto a stage where everyone was playing a part. Dinner began under a veneer of polite small talk. Course after course arrived: shrimp salad, filet mignon, caviar, red wine, but every word was carefully chosen. No one said what they really meant. Dad asked about my work. "How's the fund doing? I hear it's growing fast." I answered curtly, "Fine, sir." Reuben cut in, voice dripping with sarcasm. "Fine? You're on the cover of Forbes. The rest of us are just peasants." Tessa giggled, but her eyes were pure envy. Mom kept piling food on my plate. "Eat, honey, I cooked this myself." I knew it was all an act. I stayed mostly silent, watching every glance, every gesture. Dad kept stealing looks at me, waiting for the right moment. Mom's smile never reached her eyes. Reuben chewed aggressively, avoiding my gaze. Tessa toyed with her phone under the table, occasionally shooting me dirty looks. Inside, I felt like a stranger in the house I once called home. The polished wood-paneled walls, the expensive paintings, everything was familiar, yet I still felt like an outsider. My pulse quickened. I was waiting for the mask to drop. After dinner, as we gathered around the coffee table, my parents brought up the Forbes cover. "We're so proud of you, sweetheart," Mom said, voice syrupy. "You've become someone truly influential." Dad nodded, eyes gleaming. "Exactly. Forbes calls you the new king of energy. I always knew you'd make it." I sipped my coffee and waited. Then Dad got to the point. "Son, Adams Energy is in trouble. The company could collapse soon. I need your help to get us through this." My stomach tightened, but I wasn't surprised. Mom jumped in. invoking parental sacrifice. We raised you, gave you everything. Now it's time to give back. Family duty, right? Her voice was thick with hypocrisy, like a rope trying to bind me. Reuben and Tessa stayed quiet, but their eyes were full of hope. Hope that I would save their luxurious lifestyles. I set my cup down calmly. I already know about the company's situation. And I have news for everyone. I've acquired 32% of Adams Energy's shares. And I've also bought up 100% of its debt. The atmosphere flipped in an instant. The pretense evaporated like mist. Shock, then panic spread across every face. Dad froze, face ashen. What? You're the one behind all those quiet buy-ups. Then he exploded, slamming the table. You're profiting off our misery, taking advantage of the family company's crisis to seize control. Who the hell do you think you are? Mom went from stunned to furious. Theodore, how could you? We raised you, gave you everything, and now you betray us like this? Reuben shot to his feet. You've lost your mind. This is the family company. Tessa started crying. You just want to take everything for yourself. I stayed calm, trying to explain. I did it to join the board and turn the business around. To save the group from bankruptcy, it was the only way. Dad slammed the table again, the crack echoing through the tense room. Stop pretending to be the savior in front of me, he roared, eyes bloodshot. You didn't do this to save the company. This is revenge. You came back to destroy us all, didn't you? I clenched my fists, struggling to stay composed. If I really wanted revenge, I wouldn't be sitting here talking. He gave a bitter, venomous laugh. Then let me ask you one thing. Did you find out you're not my real son, and that's why you've come back to get even? The words hit me like an ice-cold blade straight to the chest. The room seemed to collapse around me. My ears rang, my heart pounded painfully, each beat a hammer against my ribs. What did you just say? My voice came out hoarse. I'm not your biological son. Explain. Now. Kenneth ground his teeth, eyes icy. I don't owe you any explanation. If you want the truth, go ask your grandfather. I whipped around to Mom, voice breaking. Mom, tell me, is what he said true? Paula avoided my eyes, lips pressed tight. She turned her face away and said nothing. That silence hurt more than any confirmation. Across the table, Reuben let out a cold laugh, eyes mocking. Now you finally get it, huh? Now you know exactly where you stand in this house. Tessa folded her arms, looking at me like a stranger. The room drowned in suffocating heaviness. I couldn't speak another word. My strength drained away. In a daze, I stood and walked out of that house, the place I had once called family but had never truly belonged to. My car tore through the gates into the night. Streetlights streaked past the windows in chaotic flashes. Tears welled up. I bit my lip hard to hold them back, but they came anyway. Childhood memories crashed over me like a tidal wave. Birthdays spent alone, empty seats at graduations where family should have sat. Now everything made sense. I was not their blood. Pain gripped my chest. In that storm of panic, only one face appeared clearly in my mind. Grandfather, the only person who had ever treated me like real family. Had he known all along? My car rolled along the empty suburban roads outside Houston, the night wrapping everything in a heavy blanket. The headlights swept across roadside bushes, casting long, writhing shadows, just like the dark corners of my life. In my head, my father's words kept echoing over and over. You're not my real son. It felt like a deep cut that hadn't even begun to clot, bleeding steadily, making my chest tighten in spasms. I gripped the steering wheel hard, trying to breathe evenly, but my breaths came short and ragged. How was this possible? I had lived 36 years in that family, carrying the name Adams, and now it was all just one giant lie. The streetlights streaked past the windows, pale yellow, cold, dragging my mind back to the childhood years I had buried in silence. I remember it clearly. From the time I was 4 or 5, I could already feel the invisible distance between me and the Adams family. It wasn't cruel words or beatings. No, they were far more sophisticated than that. It was a wordless, ever-present feeling, like a transparent glass wall that kept me apart from everyone else. At every family dinner around the big wooden table, Ruben's and Tessa's laughter rang out. Dad told work stories. Mom praised Ruben for a scribbled drawing. And me? I sat there quietly picking at my food, feeling like an uninvited guest. Their eyes passed over me without lingering, without warmth. I used to ask myself, what did I do wrong? Why don't they look at me the way they look at Ruben? I grew up in that house like a shadow, always on the sidelines of conversations, laughter, and the moments of connection a child is supposed to have. The sprawling villa with its manicured gardens and sun-glinting pool was nothing more to me than a lonely maze. I remember summer afternoons when Ruben and Tessa ran screaming with joy in the yard while Dad pushed them on the swings. I stood far off holding an old ball, hoping someone would call me over. They never did. "Go play by yourself, honey, Mommy's busy," Mom once said without looking up from her fashion magazine. I learned to disappear, sneak back to my room, read books, or build imaginary worlds where I was the center. Dad was stricter and colder with me than with the others. He almost never praised me, almost never defended me. I still remember the first time I brought home a perfect report card from high school. I ran into his study, eyes shining. "Daddy, I got the highest grades in my class." He glanced at the paper, nodded once, and went back to his newspaper. Mom showed concern the way one fulfills an obligation, never truly protective, never taking my side in any conflict. She was a pragmatic woman who measured love in value. When I had a high fever, she brought medicine to my bed with a flat voice. "Take this. Don't make a fuss, you'll disturb everyone." With Tessa, she would sit by the bedside all night, stroking her hair. The time Ruben and I fought over a toy, he snatched my toy car and shoved me to the ground. Mom rushed over and hugged him. "Come on, you're the older one, let your little brother have it." I got up, wiped the blood from my knee, swallowed my tears. She never asked if I was hurt. I learned to bandage my own wounds, physical and emotional. Ruben and Tessa grew up accustomed to belittling and bullying me, while I learned early to yield, endure, and make myself invisible at the center of the family. Ruben, only 3 years younger, was always jealous of anything I had, even though I had so little. He used to taunt, "You get good grades, so why don't Mom and Dad care? Maybe they found you in a dumpster." Back then, I laughed it off as a joke. Now those words cut like knives. Tessa was subtler, spoiled rotten, always demanding and indulged. She would take my things, books, clothes, without asking and smirk when I protested, "You're so stingy. We're family." I gave in every time, terrified that if I fought back, I'd be pushed even further to the edge. On nights alone in my room, I told myself, I have to be stronger. I have to prove I'm worthy. But deep down, the pain only grew. At my Harvard graduation, no one from the family came. I stood on stage amid applause, looking down at friends' parents holding flowers and cheering. My section was just cold, empty seats. I forced a smile and for the first time asked myself, am I actually part of this family? Later, even when I began succeeding, starting my fund, making millions on smart deals, my parents never acknowledged it, never showed pride. When I called to tell them about my first big contract, Dad's only reply was, "Good, but Adam's energy is the real future of this family." No praise, no celebratory dinner. To the world, I was the investment king on the cover of Forbes, but to them I remained the outsider. I grew used to standing alone at moments meant for sharing, company parties, industry awards with no family member present. I told myself, I'm strong now. I don't depend on them. But the pain still smoldered. In that darkness, one small light never went out. My grandfather, Bruce Adams. He appeared quietly at every important moment in my life. No fanfare, no show. But he was never absent. He lived in a small town 3 hours from Houston, in an old wooden house. Yet he always knew when I needed him. On my birthdays, he mailed gifts, a good book, a watch, with handwritten notes. "Grandson, I'm proud of you." At graduation, he was the only one there, sitting in the back row, clapping softly. "That's my boy," he whispered, hugging me tight. He didn't say much, but his eyes were warm, a fire that kept my frozen heart from shattering. The height of that loneliness was my wedding day with Emily. The entire Adams family was absent. Parents claimed they were busy. Reuben and Tessa didn't even reply to the invitation. I stood at the altar in my black tux, heart heavy. Guests whispered, "Where's his family? They still haven't arrived." I smiled stiffly and said they were tied up. But the only person who showed up that day was Grandpa, sitting quietly in the back row, standing in for everything a family should have given me. Afterward, he hugged me. "Seeing you happy is all I need." Tears rolled down my face, the first time I truly felt loved. He was my only anchor, the reason I never completely broke. All those years I convinced myself they were just busy, that they had their reasons, that I shouldn't resent them. Families get busy, I told myself, burying the pain deep. I built my career, started my own family, tried to leave the past behind. But now, in the dark, as I sped along the empty highway, every excuse collapsed. Rain began to fall, drops hammering the windshield, blurring the view. I turned on the wipers, but my own tears kept coming. Every empty space in my life suddenly had one single explanation. Because I had never been their blood. My chest constricted. In that storm of shock, pain, and a quiet rage just beginning to form, only one face stood out clearly. Grandpa. The only person who had ever treated me like real family. He must know. I gripped the wheel tighter, heart pounding with dread and anticipation. I had to find him. I had to ask. The car raced through the night, but my mind was already at that old wooden house. The truth was waiting, and I wasn't sure I was ready. Anger rose like a small flame beginning to burn. From this moment on, my life would never be the same. After 3 hours of driving, the small town gradually emerged under the dim glow of streetlights, old wooden houses standing silent like ghosts. I turned onto the familiar dirt road that led to my grandfather's house, a modest cabin with a pitched roof and a creaky porch swing out front. I pulled up to the gate, killed the engine, and sat there for a long moment. My heart pounded like a drum. My hands trembled. The rain had stopped, but the air was damp and cold, seeping into my skin. I stepped out. My shoes splashed through puddles, the sound echoing in the dead of night. I knocked, 3 sharp, decisive knocks. Silence. Then slow footsteps. The door opened, and there stood my grandfather, Bruce Adams, in an old pair of pajamas, silver hair tousled, eyes still heavy with sleep. But the moment he saw me, shock flashed across his face like a lightning strike. "Theodore, what are you doing here at this hour? What's wrong?" I swallowed hard, my voice hoarse. "Grandpa, I need to talk. I need the truth. Right now." He stared at me, the deep lines on his aged face growing sharper under the faint yellow hallway light. He didn't ask anything else. He simply stepped aside and motioned for me to come in. I entered. The familiar scent of old wood and coffee hit me, but this time it brought no comfort. The living room was simple, a worn sofa, a cold fireplace. I sat down, gripping my knees to steady myself. He took the chair across from me, his slightly trembling hands resting on the armrests, his eyes carrying the weight of the world. I began to speak, voice shaky at first, but growing stronger. I told him about Dad's call, the fake family dinner, my takeover of Adam's energy shares and debt. Then I reached the climax. Dad said I'm not his biological son. He told me if I wanted the truth, I had to come ask you. I looked him dead in the eye and waited. The air was stretched tight as a wire. Only the ticking of the wall clock broke the silence. He stayed quiet for a long, long time, minutes that felt like hours. His hands shook harder. His gaze dropped to the floor. Finally, he let out a heavy, weary sigh, as though releasing a burden he had carried his entire life. "Theodore, I've tried to bury this for decades, but now there's no hiding it anymore. Your entire tragedy began with my own hands. My heart seized. Anticipation rose until I could barely breathe. What do you mean, tragedy? Who are my real parents? He lifted his head, eyes red, voice slow and pained as if recounting a nightmare. More than 30 years ago, I was a powerful man running one of the biggest financial crime syndicates in the country. Dirty money, laundering, market manipulation, I did it all to build an empire. Your biological parents were police officers, a young, brilliant couple investigating my case. They were getting dangerously close to the evidence that would have put me away forever. I panicked. I ordered their entire family eliminated to erase every trace. His words exploded in my head like a bomb. Eliminate my entire family? I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. He continued, voice trembling. That night, my men broke into their home. They reported the job was done, but they found a baby just over a year old crying in a crib. That baby was you, Theodore. They asked me what to do. I felt a moment of mercy. You were so small, so innocent. For the first and only time, I went against my own orders. I told them to take you away from the scene before the police arrived. To sever every link, I arranged a secret legal adoption through underground channels. Changed your name to Adams and handed you over to my son Kenneth to raise. In exchange, I gave him full control of the legitimate business empire. I sat frozen, every word slicing through the memories and meaning of my entire life. My real parents, brave police officers, murdered on my grandfather's orders, and I, the leftover child, was saved by the very man who killed them? The room spun. The walls seemed to close in. You killed my parents, I whispered, voice breaking. He nodded, tears rolling down his wrinkled cheeks. From that moment on, I lived two lives. A kingpin in the shadows and a man forever haunted by the fact that I had ordered the murder of my own grandson's parents. I watched you grow up, trying to atone by quietly being there for you. But I don't deserve forgiveness. You have every right to hate me. In that instant, the grandfather I had revered and loved my whole childhood ceased to exist. Before me sat only the man who had ordered the slaughter of my real family. That truth demolished the last pillar holding up my world. I nearly collapsed. My legs gave way. I gripped the chair to keep from falling. I realized I wasn't just a child swapped at birth. I was the sole living witness to a horrific crime. If I spoke out, the entire empire would crumble. If I stayed silent, I would carry this curse forever. I couldn't utter another word. I turned and bolted from the house. Shock enveloped me. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would burst. My throat choked on air. Rain started falling again, icy needles soaking through my coat. I stumbled into the driver's seat, hands shaking as I fumbled the keys, nearly dropping them. The engine roared to life and the car tore away into the night, as if I could outrun the truth that had just swallowed my entire existence. The dirt road was slick with mud, tires flung it in arcs, but I didn't care. Tears blurred my vision. I wiped them furiously with my sleeve. Why? Why did you do it? I screamed inside the car, pounding the steering wheel. Rage now blazed like fire, consuming everything. I fled that house in the darkness, carrying the blood-soaked truth of my origins and a burden of choice no one else could bear for me. The highway back to Houston felt endless, every mile a punch to the chest. The rain had stopped, but cold wind whipped through the cracked window, chilling my skin like icy whispers. I drove on autopilot, my mind spinning with images. My grandfather under the dim lamp, voice trembling as he described the night my real parents, people I had never even known existed, were murdered in their own home. And me, the crying baby in the crib, spared by the very man who ordered their deaths. My heart thudded heavily, each beat like a hammer against my ribs. I was trapped among three impossible choices. Expose everything, stay silent, or let the truth destroy me from the inside. I hated him for killing my parents. Yet he was the one who had let me live. Gratitude and rage strangled me at the same time. I reached my downtown Houston penthouse around midnight, my body drained of strength. My legs felt like lead as I pushed open the door. The hinges creaked in the pitch-black hallway. The vast apartment with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering city now felt nothing more than a cold, empty shell. I collapsed onto the sofa without turning on the lights, letting the darkness swallow me like a heavy cloak. The distant hum of traffic far below reminded me the world kept moving, but for me, everything had frozen. I sat alone in the dark, torn apart all night by hatred, gratitude, fury, and despair. Hatred for my grandfather because he had ordered the murder of the parents who could have given me a real childhood, a warm family. Gratitude because he had saved me, given me a chance to live, even if it was built on lies. Rage at my adoptive parents, Kenneth and Paula, for knowing the truth yet treating me like an outsider, a bothersome obligation. Despair because who was I now? Theodore Adams, the powerful investor on the cover of Forbes, or just a fragment of a crime, a surviving witness by pure chance? Near dawn, after a night of endless inner struggle, I stood up, head heavy but resolute. I had to go back and face Bruce one last time. Ask for more details, maybe apologize for running away, or I didn't know. But I couldn't leave it hanging like this. I couldn't live with this void. As the first light broke and fog blanketed the city like a veil of secrets, I rushed to my car. The engine roared to life in the empty garage. I drove back to Bruce's old house with a chaotic mind and a growing, inexplicable sense of dread. The highway was brighter now, weak morning sun casting pale gold rays through the windshield. Yet it did nothing to chase away the fear. What will he say? Is he truly sorry? I kept asking, knuckles white on the wheel. The unease grew stronger, a cold shiver down my spine I couldn't explain. I called him several times on the way. No answer. He's probably still asleep, I told myself, but my stomach twisted. The small town appeared, peaceful in the early light, old wooden houses standing silent. But Bruce's house looked lonelier than ever, like a ghost from the past. I screeched to a stop, hurried to the door, heart pounding like war drums. The door was ajar, just a crack. Inside, total silence. No light like the night before. My chest tightened. Why was the door open? Grandpa was always careful, especially at night. I pushed it open and called softly, no reply. The air was cold, laced with the stale smell of cigarettes and something heavier, more ominous. I rushed to the bedroom, legs trembling, breath ragged, and then I froze. He lay motionless on the bed, face deathly pale, breathing so faint it was almost gone, chest barely rising like a last autumn leaf. Beside the bed, an overturned bottle of sleeping pills, white tablets scattered across the wooden floor like deadly snowflakes. I screamed and lunged forward, shaking him, but his body was ice cold. The pulse under my fingers was faint and fading. His eyes were half closed, his aged face eerily calm, as if he had finally let go of every burden. Panic crashed over me like a tidal wave. I called emergency services in near hysteria, hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. Ambulance. My grandfather. He overdosed on sleeping pills. The address is. Please hurry. I knelt by the bed, trying CPR the way I'd seen in movies, pressing his chest, muttering, "Wake up. I still don't know everything. Don't leave me like this." But he didn't respond. His breathing grew weaker. The ambulance arrived after 15 minutes that felt like centuries, sirens shattering the quiet town and drawing curious neighbors. They lifted him onto the stretcher. I followed, climbing in as he flatlined twice on the way. The paramedics pounded his chest, injected drugs, forced oxygen, the machines beeping chaotically. I prayed silently, clutching his cold hand. "Don't leave me, Grandpa. I haven't forgiven you yet, but not like this." The smell of antiseptic mixed with my own panicked sweat, everything blurred like a nightmare. At the hospital, every effort failed. Doctors rushed in and out, the ER blindingly white, machines screaming, then silence. "We're very sorry," the doctor said, voice low, hand on my shoulder. "He passed away shortly after arrival. Cause of death: acute respiratory failure due to sleeping pill overdose." I stood frozen, emptiness swallowing me like a black hole. The only person who had been both my savior and my enemy was gone forever. He had died, taking his secrets and his atonement to the grave, leaving me with a gaping void. I collapsed onto a waiting room bench, mind blank, unable to cry anymore. Just a numb pain spreading from my chest through my whole body. The hospital bustled around me, nurses pushing carts, patients moaning, but for me the world had stopped, only my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. Soon after, the Adams family arrived. I heard their familiar footsteps echoing down the hall: Kenneth, Paula, Reuben, Tessa. They entered the waiting area, faces cold as stone, not a single tear. No questions about Bruce's condition, no pretense of grief. Instead, their eyes fixed on me with barely concealed hatred, like daggers aimed straight at my heart. Kenneth loomed over me, voice snarling, "What are you doing here? You killed my father, you traitor! You drove him to this!" Paula wailed theatrically, "Theodore, what did you do to him? He died because of you. Because of the secrets you dug up. I know everything." Reuben glared, fists clenched. "You're not our family. Get out. Don't pretend to grieve here." Tessa sneered. "Happy now? You stole the shares and now you've taken Grandpa's life too. You monster." The air was suffocating with tension. I stood, voice steady but shaking. "He killed himself. Because of the secret you all kept from me my whole life. He told me everything. About my real parents, about his crime." For a second they went pale and silent, but then Kenneth roared, "You're lying. He would never tell. And now you'll pay for this." Their eyes burned with vengeance, already plotting retaliation right there in the hospital. In that moment of icy hostility, I understood Bruce's death wasn't just a tragedy. It was the beginning of another storm. They would never let me go. Lawsuits, media smear campaigns, every weapon to drag me down. With him gone, the will and the secrets would surface, and if the truth came out, they would lose everything. I walked out of the hospital in a daze, legs heavy as lead, heart flooded with pain, confusion, and a clear premonition that I had just been shoved into the center of a tragedy far greater than I could yet grasp. Outside, the sun blazed mercilessly, yet I felt frozen to the bone, as though Bruce's death was spreading its chill through me. I drove home on autopilot, mind chaos. What will the will say? What will they do? Should I reveal the truth? Behind me, Bruce's quiet death had closed a 30-year-old secret and opened a far darker, more ferocious spiral. The days that followed unfolded like a prolonged nightmare with no end in sight. Bruce's funeral was scheduled 3 days later at the small cemetery on the outskirts of the town where he had spent his final years in quiet seclusion. The notice came in a brief, impersonal phone call from the funeral home, the voice on the other end cold and professional, as if announcing a routine event. To me, it was a ticking bomb. I sat alone in my penthouse, staring out at the bustling city of Houston far below, but everything felt unreal, blurred. Neon lights flickered outside the windows, distant car horns echoed, yet they only deepened the loneliness gnawing at me. In those waiting days, I existed in a violent tug-of-war between two extremes: grief for the man who had been my only protector throughout childhood, and hatred for the monster who had ordered the murder of my real parents. Every warm memory of Bruce was instantly crushed by the blood-soaked truth that had just been revealed. I pictured him in a dark office, coldly issuing the order to wipe out my parents, people whose faces I had never even seen, and me, the crying baby in the crib, spared by the very man who condemned them. Finally, the day of the funeral arrived. I woke early, my body exhausted from sleepless nights. Dressed in full black mourning attire, I stood before the mirror and saw a gaunt face with dark circles under the eyes. I realized I wasn't going to say goodbye because I had forgiven him, but because I needed to bid farewell to the part of my childhood he had once sheltered. He had been the only light in that darkness, even if it was now stained with blood. I tightened my tie, took a deep breath, and drove out of the city. The familiar highway felt heavier than ever today. The sun shone, but it gave no warmth, only heightened the tension rising in my chest. I pulled over once, breathing hard, wondering, what would they do? Chase me away from the funeral? Publicly humiliate me? The sense of dread grew, like a storm about to break. I kept driving, classical music playing softly on the radio, but all I could hear was my own heartbeat. The small cemetery lay nestled among ancient trees, peaceful yet heavy with the scent of chrysanthemums and damp earth. I parked far away and walked slowly toward the funeral hall. Mourners had already gathered, old neighbors, a few former business associates, and of course, the Adams family. I entered quietly, there to pay final respects to the man who had been with me in his last moments. I was the one who found him, called the ambulance, watched him slip away. No one could deny that. But the instant I stepped into the hall, every Adams eye locked onto me with undisguised hatred. The air grew suffocating, whispers rose around me like needles. Bruce's coffin sat in the center, draped in white flowers, his face visible through the glass panel, serene as if merely asleep. Kenneth stood first, his voice booming before the crowd. He openly mocked my identity in front of everyone, declaring I was nothing more than a foundling with no right to be at this funeral. "Look who dared show up, the trash heap kid," he sneered, pointing at me. "You're not Adam's blood. This is my father's funeral, not a place for outsiders." Murmurs spread. Some guests looked at me with curiosity, others with pity. My pulse raced, but I stood motionless. Paula followed, her words icy and venomous, accusing me of ingratitude and even implying I had driven Bruce to his death. "What are you doing here?" she shrieked, fake tears streaming. "You pushed him to this." "Ungrateful wretch. We raised you and this is how you repay us?" Reuben could barely contain his rage, stepping close enough for everyone to hear his hiss. "You're nothing but excess baggage. Get out before I lose it." Tessa smirked. "Exactly, big brother. Think buying shares makes you the boss? Grandpa died because of you and you'll pay for it." The atmosphere in the funeral hall was stretched to breaking. Guests fell silent, eyes darting between us. Blood rushed to my face, rage boiled inside, but I held it in. My hands trembled with tension. I realized this was the moment they wanted me to explode, to prove I was the villain. I refused to fall into the trap. I stood there and took every insult without justification or long rebuttal. Only when Kenneth stepped forward, ready to physically shove me out, did I speak, one short, calm sentence. "I'm not here for the Adams family. I'm here for the man who raised me my whole life." The words hung like a delayed explosion, freezing the room in suffocating silence for several seconds. Whispers grew louder, some guests nodded in agreement, their gazes shifting from me to the Adams family. Kenneth stood stunned, face purple with fury, but he dared not act in front of the crowd. Paula bit her lip. Reuben clenched his fists. Tessa glared daggers. They were livid yet powerless, unable to throw me out without humiliating themselves. I turned, walked to the coffin, bowed my head in silence before my grandfather, and whispered, "Goodbye, Grandpa." My heart ached with a mix of tension and sorrow. This was the last time I would ever see him. The ceremony continued in oppressive heaviness, prayers echoing, but I heard none of it. One by one, the mourners left after the burial, leaving the cemetery quiet under the fading afternoon sun. I stayed alone before Bruce's grave as the wind swept through the cold stone markers. Before the headstone engraved Bruce Adams, all the hatred, gratitude, pain, and confusion surged inside me, yet refused to settle into any single emotion. I knelt, fingers touching the damp earth, memories replaying in slow motion. Him sitting in the back row at my wedding, clapping quietly. Mailing letters of congratulations after my first successes. And now lying here, taking his secrets to the grave. I realized that from this moment on, the only person who could have given me final answers about my life was forever beneath the ground. No one left to ask, no one left to blame. Tears rolled down my cheeks, mixed with anger. He had taken the easy way out, leaving me to carry everything. I bowed my head long before the grave, bidding farewell both to the childhood protector and to the enemy who carried the truth into death, then silently turned and walked away. On the drive home, night had fallen. Pale streetlights streaked past the windows. I gripped the wheel, exhausted yet resolute. They wouldn't stop. The will was about to be read and the real storm was coming. I called Monica. "Get ready. They're about to hit back." Her voice was worried. "I've got everything covered. Are you okay?" Tension surged, but I knew I had to face it. For my real parents, for the stolen childhood, and for myself. The battle begins now. Few days later, as I sat in my investment fund office trying to focus on an energy market report, my phone rang. Unknown number, but the voice on the other end was polished and professional. "Mr. Theodore Adams? This is William Crowley, the late Mr. Bruce Adams' personal attorney. I need to meet with you to read the will. Can you come to my office this afternoon?" I froze, fingers tightening around the phone until my knuckles went white. Bruce left a will? I couldn't understand why a man who had been both my protector and my enemy, the man who murdered my real parents and then saved me, would leave anything to me at all. My heart raced, tension surged like a wave. I answered, forcing calm into my voice. "Fine, I'll be there." I hung up, leaned back in my chair, mind spinning. What could possibly be in that will? A gesture of atonement or another time bomb? I called Monica. "Cancel everything this afternoon. I have something personal." She sounded worried. "Boss, is everything okay? Is this about Adam's energy?" I shook my head, though she couldn't see. "No, personal, but stay ready. Things might get messy." I drove to the lawyer's office in downtown Houston, a sleek glass building with a luxurious lobby, the faint scent of coffee and the soft clatter of keyboards. The whole way I kept wondering, what did Grandpa leave me? Money? Shares? Or just a belated apology? The unease grew like a shadow tailing my car. When I walked into the conference room, the entire Adams family was already there. They sat around the long table, faces taut, eyes snapping to the door the moment I entered. The air was stifling, polished wood walls, stacks of files on the table. The second they saw me, Kenneth and Paula erupted, insisting I had no right to be present, let alone any claim to Bruce's will. Kenneth shot to his feet, face crimson. "What the hell are you doing here? This is Adam's family business. You're not blood. How dare you show your face?" Paula chimed in, voice shrill with rage. "Exactly. You killed him and now you want to steal his estate? I won't allow it." Reuben spat venom, leaning back with a sneer. "Look who's here, the dumpster baby. Your presence is a joke. Someone like you doesn't belong in this room, let alone deserve a single mention of inheritance. Get out before I call security." Tessa smirked beside him. "What did you think you'd get by coming? Grandpa died because of you and now you want to rob us blind? Shameless." The room crackled with tension. The lawyer's staff exchanged awkward glances. My pulse hammered, anger boiling. But I stayed calm and simply said the law would decide everything, then quietly took the seat at the far end of the table. "I was summoned by Mr. Crowley according to Bruce's will," I said evenly, not looking at them. William Crowley, the attorney, a middle-aged man with gold-rimmed glasses and a calm voice, nodded. "Please, everyone, settle down. Mr. Theodore is named in Mr. Bruce Adams' will. We will begin." As William started reading the will, the room fell into a heavy silence. He opened the file and read slowly and clearly. "The will was executed 6 months ago, witnessed by 2 independent parties." My heart beat faster. The suspense was suffocating. I glanced at the Adams family. They sat rigid, eyes gleaming with expectation. Then the bomb dropped. Bruce bequeathed to me his entire hidden fortune, the assets never recorded in public filings, vast land holdings in Texas and California, office towers in New York, a port in Louisiana, strategic stakes in major oil and tech conglomerates, a network of secret investment funds and offshore trusts spanning Switzerland to the Caymans, a fortune worth billions, carefully concealed behind shell companies. When my name was read alongside that staggering wealth, I sat stunned for a moment, mouth open, mind blank. Then it hit me. This wasn't generosity. It was Bruce's final attempt to atone for a lifetime of guilt with money built on blood. He was repaying me, the child he saved, the son of the people he murdered, with the proceeds of his crimes. My chest tightened, tension mixed with sorrow. A belated apology or just another burden? William continued. All remaining shares and control related to Adam's energy are bequeathed to the Adams family. Kenneth, Paula, Reuben, and Tessa. Dead silence. The Adams family went pale as they realized they were inheriting a bankrupt company drowning in debt and worthless stock, while Bruce's true fortune, the one that actually mattered, went to the adopted grandson. Paula burst into furious tears. This can't be. He was insane. How could he give everything to that bastard? Kenneth exploded, slamming the table. Bruce was manipulated. Theodore forced him before he died. I knew it. He went to see him that night to coerce the will. He jabbed a finger at me, face purple. What did you do? Poison. Threats. I won't let this stand. Reuben went berserk, leaping up and lunging toward me. You stole everything. I'll sue you for every cent. Who do you think you are? Trash picked up from the gutter. Tessa wailed. You monster! You took our entire inheritance. The room descended into chaos. Staff had to intervene to keep Reuben from attacking me. William calmly confirmed, all documents are fully legal with no signs of coercion. The will was videotaped. Mr. Bruce was of sound mind when he signed. It was oil on the fire, but it changed nothing. In a storm of rage and humiliation, the Adams family stormed out, Kenneth turning back for one last glare. This isn't over. The door slammed, leaving the room thick with tension and only my ragged breathing. Before I left, William called me aside and handed me a handwritten letter from Bruce in a small sealed metal box. These are the 2 items Mr. Bruce instructed me to give you privately after the full reading, he said quietly. I took the box and the letter, feeling loss, confusion, and being pulled deeper into secrets still unsolved. The metal box was heavy and cold in my hand, like it held a bomb. The letter, yellowed envelope, shaky handwriting, made my heart clench. What was this? A final explanation? Or more crimes? I tucked them away, thanked the lawyer, and walked out in silence, carrying the last legacy of the man who had reshaped my entire life, and stepping into a path even darker than the one I had just walked. Back at the penthouse around midnight, I placed the handwritten letter and the sealed metal box on the gleaming walnut table in the living room. Streetlights filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting eerie shadows over them like ghosts. For a very long time, I sat motionless on the sofa, staring at them, too afraid to open either one. My heart pounded. The tension was suffocating. What would I find if I opened them? An apology? Or evidence that would drag me straight into hell? I stood and paced the room, my trembling fingers brushing the cold surface of the metal box. Memories flooded back. Grandpa sitting by the lake teaching me to fish. His gentle smile. Then that night when his voice shook as he confessed the truth. Rage and anguish tore at me. He had saved me, yet now he left me this burden. No matter what's inside, I have to open them, I whispered to myself, voice hoarse in the darkness. I started with the letter. The envelope tore with a dry, brittle sound that echoed in the silent room. Bruce's shaky handwriting appeared on the yellowed paper under the dim desk lamp. I read slowly, my chest tightening with every line. Theodore, my dear grandson, I write these words with the belated remorse of a man who knows his crimes can never be redeemed by anything. I killed your parents, innocent people, only to protect the filthy empire I had built. I have lived with that guilt every day, watching you grow while my heart was torn to pieces. I know I do not deserve forgiveness. I am a monster and I accept that. I have used both my death and every cent of my fortune as the final price I must pay to atone for sins I could never forgive myself for. That fortune, land, money, everything. I leave to you not because you are an Adams, but because you are the child I saved with the last shred of conscience I had left. No matter how much you hate me, in my heart you remain the only child I ever saved with my own conscience. Use it as you see fit. Whether to forgive or to punish, the choice is yours. I go now, hoping to find peace. Bruce. I folded the letter with shaking hands, a lump rising in my throat. His words cut like knives. Genuine remorse, or just a way to unburden himself before death? Rage exploded. I slammed my fist on the table, the sound reverberating through the dark room. Using blood money to buy redemption? Money built on my parents' blood. Yet deep down, part of me ached. He had lived with that guilt his entire life and chosen death to end it. After folding the letter, I turned to the metal box. The old combination lock clicked open after a few tries. His birthday, mine. Inside were copies of the original police investigation files compiled by my real parents, along with decades of financial records, audio cassettes, and forged transaction documents Bruce had secretly kept for over 30 years. I held the folders, feeling as though I were touching the final days of their lives. Yellowed pages, my father Michael's hurried handwriting detailing money laundering networks, shell companies, and evidence pointing straight at Bruce Adams. My mother Anna's marginal notes analyzing suspicious transfers. The cassette tapes, old-fashioned reels, surely containing witness statements or intercepted calls. Transaction records, millions funneled through offshore accounts, fake invoices, everything tied to massive financial crimes. Every question, every gap in my past suddenly filled with brutal pieces. My parents had been inches from exposing my grandfather, and they died for it. My heart ached. Tears fell as I turned each page, tension rising. If I made this public, everything would collapse. I understood that going public wouldn't just condemn a dead man. Bruce's grave would be desecrated, his name dragged through the mud, but would also expose an entire chain of accomplices to justice. Perhaps Kenneth knew something, perhaps old partners. The empire would crumble, and I, the heir, would be dragged down with it. For hours I sat motionless in the dark room, caught between two impossible choices. 1. Bring everything into the light, finish the path my real parents had started. Justice for them, for every victim. Report it. Hand over the files, let the law take over. The price. I lose everything. Assets seized, reputation destroyed, possibly prison if I'm implicated. The other? Bury it all. Accept a fortune built on blood and live in peace and wealth, but forever haunted by a guilty conscience. For the first time, I truly understood that the inheritance I had received wasn't money. It was a lifelong moral sentence. Every dollar stained with blood, every acre a graveyard. I stood and paced, crumpling the files in my fists. Tension choked me. Which way? Light or darkness? Rain still fell outside, as if weeping for me. While I still hadn't decided, the Adams family's counterattack began. The next morning, Monica called in a panic. "Boss, they've filed suit. They're accusing you of undue influence, manipulating the will, and causing Bruce's suicide through emotional distress." My stomach knotted, but I wasn't surprised. Kenneth had threatened it the night before. I called legal. "Prepare the files. We fight back." But that was only the start. Paula secretly fed stories to the media claiming I was the mastermind behind the entire family tragedy. Within hours, the press exploded with smear pieces questioning my ethics and the origins of my wealth. That morning, I opened my laptop to see the headline on Forbes online. Theodore Adams, from energy king to questionable heir. Anonymous family sources were quoted. He pressured Grandpa into changing the will the night before the suicide. Is that vast fortune really clean? Overnight, I had gone from legitimate heir to the eye of a public storm, while I still hadn't chosen whether to stand in the light or remain in the dark. My phone rang nonstop, reporters, nervous partners canceling meetings. Monica updated, "Boss, our fund's shares are dropping. They're spreading rumors about you." I collapsed into my chair, mind reeling. The tension was suffocating. I had to decide fast before they swallowed me whole. I stared at the metal box on the table, clenching my fists. Mom, Dad, what should I do? Rain kept falling, but the real storm was only beginning. I stood, called legal. We hit back, but first I need time. Rage now burned like fire. They wanted war, and I would give them one. Yet deep inside, the fear grew. Would the truth in that box save me or drag me into the abyss? 3 days later, the federal court in Houston opened the hearing on the disputed inheritance and the validity of Bruce Adams's will under intense media scrutiny. The courthouse was packed with reporters, cameras flashed relentlessly outside, and public opinion boiled over online. I drove there through a drizzly morning, my heart pounding like war drums. The parking lot was jammed with news vans. The moment I stepped out, reporters swarmed. Mr. Adams, did you manipulate the will? Did you drive your grandfather to suicide? I said nothing, pushing through the crowd flanked by my legal team. Inside the courtroom, the air was stifling. Polished wooden benches, the judge high above, and the Adams family seated opposite me, eyes burning with hatred. Kenneth glared. Paula dabbed at fake tears. Reuben clenched his fists. Tessa sneered. Observers, investors, former associates whispered. The tension was electric. The hearing began with the plaintiff's side, my family claiming undue influence and asset theft. Their lawyer spoke eloquently of coercion and fraud. Tension rose. I sat motionless, hands clenched beneath the table, waiting my turn. William Crowley, Bruce's attorney, presented clear evidence that the will had been executed transparently with no interference from me. He played the video of Bruce signing 6 months earlier. Voice steady, mind sharp. I voluntarily leave my estate to my grandson Theodore for personal reasons. The judge nodded, but the other side countered. The video could be doctored. He forced Grandpa right before he died. The room grew feverish. Reporters scribbled furiously. When it was my turn, I did not argue, did not defend myself, did not trade barbs with the Adams family or plead my personal rights. My own lawyer looked at me anxiously. Mr. Adams, do you wish to speak? I shook my head, stood quietly, and walked to the judge's bench carrying the folder with Bruce's original handwritten letter and the contents of the metal box. Heart hammering, legs trembling with tension, I placed them on the desk. Your Honor, I submit these documents for the court's consideration. I laid down Bruce's handwritten letter and the entire contents of the metal box. Copies of my real parents' police investigation files, decades of financial records, audio cassettes, and forged transaction documents. The courtroom froze as if struck by lightning. The judge flipped through the files, face paling. This is criminal evidence? The plaintiffs, my family, went rigid. Kenneth shouted. Lies. He fabricated everything. But even their lawyer fell silent as the documents were examined. The material went far beyond inheritance. It exposed a decades-long financial crime syndicate, money laundering, market manipulation, elimination of rivals, all masterminded by Bruce Adams, backed by ironclad evidence he himself had preserved. Reporters erupted. Cameras flashed wildly. The hearing was immediately suspended as federal investigators were called in. The FBI and Department of Justice launched an expanded criminal probe, conducting on-site interviews. I sat motionless, pulse still racing, rage giving way to a strange relief. The truth was out no matter the cost. Kenneth glared at me with pure hatred. You'll regret this. I didn't look back. I only thought of my real parents. Justice for them at last. The investigation dragged on for weeks, but the fallout came fast. Asset after asset tied to illicit funds was frozen and later seized. New York office towers, the Louisiana port, offshore investment funds. Investigators tore through records. The cassette tapes were played in sealed rooms, Bruce's voice coldly ordering eliminations, millions in dirty money transferred. Assets proven clean, some personal funds and later acquired land, were returned to me in strict accordance with the will. The distinction between clean and dirty assets was publicly and transparently documented, ending all accusations of personal greed. At the same time, I completed the legal process to reclaim my true identity. I went to the civil registry with forged adoption papers and DNA evidence from Bruce's old hair samples and the original police files. The judge signed the order. Henceforth, you are Theodore Rutherford. My heart clenched as I held the new birth certificate, no longer the borrowed name Adams I had carried for 36 years, but the real surname of my murdered parents. The press ran headlines: Theodore Adams changes identity. Family secrets exposed. Public sentiment shifted from suspicion to sympathy. The investigation's ripple effects quickly reached Adams' energy. Old loans and contracts were found indirectly tied to Bruce's former criminal network. Banks immediately tightened credit and called in millions early. Partners canceled contracts en masse, terrified of association. Shares plummeted. Trading was halted. Adams Energy officially declared bankruptcy soon after, with a cold press release: long-standing energy firm collapses amid financial scandal. I read the news with a heavy heart, no triumph, only sadness. The Adams family lost everything used as collateral. The mansion was seized by the bank, luxury cars repossessed, accounts frozen. They were forced to leave the villa that had once symbolized power, manicured gardens, sparkling pool, and move into a cramped, mold-stained rental on the outskirts of Houston without staff or servants. Kenneth broke mentally after the total collapse of his company and reputation. The once mighty CEO now wandered the small apartment, eyes hollow, drinking to forget. Paula, stripped of her life of luxury, scrambled over every small expense. Ruben and Tessa, for the first time, faced real hardship. No more privileges to shield them. Ruben lost his job. Tessa sold designer clothes to survive. I learned the details from the papers, and Monica, "Boss, they're really bankrupt. The mansion went to auction." Seeing the Adams family ruined, I felt neither satisfaction nor lingering hatred, only an emptiness I couldn't name. The price of sin never falls on just one person. They paid, but so did I. I lost my grandfather, my past, and now lived with a void. The tension has given way to a fragile peace. I stand at the window overlooking the city and whisper, "Justice has come." But why does it still hurt so much? After all those upheavals, I return to the rhythm of ordinary life, continuing to run my investment fund as if no storm had ever torn through my existence. Monica, my ever-loyal CFO, greeted me each morning with her professional smile. "Boss, the green energy sector is surging. We've got a new deal out of California." I nodded, settled into the leather chair, and flipped through reports, yet my mind still drifted elsewhere. Work became my sedative, analyzing charts, team meetings, signing contracts, helping me forget the sleepless nights haunted by memories of my grandfather and those blood-stained files. Now everything felt simpler. No more secrets, no more burdens. I threw myself into renewable energy, pouring capital into solar battery startups as if to atone for the old crimes. Colleagues looked at me with a mix of respect and curiosity. "You okay, boss? After everything?" I gave a faint smile. "I'm fine. Let's keep moving." Yet that fragile peace still felt breakable, like thin glass before a gust of wind. I appeared in the media far more quietly now, far less flamboyantly, no longer the man who had just inherited a colossal fortune. Reporters swarmed after the trial, microphones thrust forward. "Mr. Rutherford, how do you feel after winning? What will you do with that vast estate?" I paused, voice even. "Justice has been served." No further comment. No parties, no long Forbes profiles. I avoided the flashbulbs, choosing closed-door meetings and quiet business trips. Public opinion still buzzed. Some called me a hero of justice. Others whispered about the lucky heir born from crime, but I no longer cared. True peace came from no longer hiding, no longer running. I jogged along Buffalo Bayou every evening, thinking of my real parents, people I never met but now had graves to visit. A new life had begun, yet a dull ache remained. Sometime later, in their desperation, the Adams family came to me seeking help. It was a drizzly afternoon as I left the office after a long meeting. I stepped into the glass tower's lobby, surrounded by the rush of people when I saw them standing there, Kenneth, Paula, Ruben, and Tessa, no longer the powerful family they once were. Kenneth was gaunt, hair whiter, suit old and wrinkled. Paula had lost her calculating ambition, eyes ringed with exhaustion, wearing cheap clothes. Ruben no longer sported his proud beard, just a tired young man. Tessa had lost her designer glow, hair messy, no makeup. They stood in the rain, soaked, eyes filled with fear and pleading. My heart clenched, not with hatred but with sadness at their fall. Kenneth stepped forward, voice trembling. "Theodore, we need to talk." I stopped and nodded toward the building. Tension rose. They were here to beg? After all the slander and lawsuits? I led them to a private meeting room, closed the glass door. The air was thick with the smell of cold coffee and paper. They sat, hands clasped tight. Paula spoke first, already crying. "Theodore, we've lost everything. The mansion, the cars, the money, the banks took it all. We're left with a tiny rental we can barely eat." Kenneth cut in, voice breaking, none of his old authority left. "Theodore, we were wrong. We hid the truth from you, treated you terribly, but now, help us. Just a loan, a job, anything. We're so sorry." Ruben lowered his head. "Brother, I'm sorry for how I treated you growing up. I regret it. Please help me." Tessa sobbed. "I was used to luxury, now I sell my things to survive. Please." Their pleas, full of fear and belated remorse, echoed in the room, making the air heavier. Tension mixed with sorrow. They had once been family, now only ghosts of the past. I listened in silence, letting every word land, never interrupting. My heart held no rage anymore, only emptiness. They were paying the price, yet why did it still hurt? Finally I spoke, voice calm and cold. "Everyone must bear the consequences of their own choices. You hid my identity my whole life, treated me like an outsider, and now you beg. I can't help you." They froze. Paula wailed louder. "Please, for old time's sake." Kenneth pleaded. "We raised you." I shook my head. "That wasn't raising. That was obligation without humanity. What you're suffering now is the result of your choices. And Bruce's. I'm not taking revenge, but I'm not saving you either. You have to walk this road yourselves." I refused to help, not out of vengeance, not out of spite. I simply showed them out with calm finality, severing the last tie between me and the Adams family. They stood, shuffled to the door. Ruben muttered curses under his breath, but Paula turned back one last time, eyes filled with despair. The door closed. I sat still and exhaled. From that moment, the past was truly laid to rest. No hatred left, no way back. Real peace arrived, not joy, but freedom. Not long after, I signed every asset inherited from Bruce into a fully transparent public charity foundation. It was a decision reached after many long nights at my desk, reviewing the remaining clean assets, small investment funds, legally acquired land. I called the lawyers, set up a charitable trust. All of Bruce's estate. The foundation supports victims of financial crime, families of unsolved cases, and witness protection programs. I kept nothing for myself from wealth built on blood. I saw it as the only way to break the cycle of guilt Bruce had started. Money born from blood now used to heal. The signing was quiet in the lawyer's office. With the final signature, I breathed easier. Headlines read, "Theodore Rutherford donates entire inheritance to charity." Tension rose as I read, not fear but relief. I had officially severed every legal and emotional tie to the Adams past. Name removed from documents, contacts deleted, the past allowed to sink into oblivion. I poured all my time into my own fund, my career, and the small family I had built with my own hands. The charity became my mission. I flew to cities, met victims of financial crime, listened to their stories. A mother who lost her home to fraud, a family from an old unsolved case. "Thank you for creating this fund to help people like us," they said. I smiled. It's justice, long overdue. My career recovered, the fund thrived in clean energy, new deals bringing hope, and my little family, Emily and Jack, was my true light. Emily held me every night. Are you okay now? I nodded. I am. Now I get to really live. Jack ran through the house laughing. Daddy, take me to the park. I played with him, taught him chess the way Grandpa once taught me, but with real love, no secrets. One peaceful day, I took my wife and son to visit my real parents' graves. It was a small cemetery on the outskirts where, after investigation, I had found them. 2 simple headstones engraved Michael and Anna Rutherford with the words, "Died in the line of duty." Blue sky, gentle breeze, leaves rustling around the graves. Emily held flowers. Jack asked curiously, "Are these Grandpa and Grandma, Daddy?" I knelt, voice thick. "Yes, son. Let me tell you about them." Before their graves, I told the whole story of my origins, a closing of the past and a promise for the future. From a child whose identity was stolen, raised in coldness, to a man who fought for the truth, and now finally free. Emily listened, squeezing my hand. Jack stared wide-eyed at the stones. Standing with my child before grandparents he never met, I felt for the first time the full meaning of family, not blood, but love and true protection. Real peace came, warm as sunlight. Looking back on the entire journey, from a boy whose life was swapped, raised in indifference, to a man who reclaimed his truth, I understand that the most terrifying thing is not loss, but losing one's conscience. The sleepless nights, the tense courtrooms, the blood-soaked secrets, all taught me that conscience is the only light that guides us. Lose it and we are lost forever. I learned that money can buy many things, but never a life, never the truth, never a clear conscience. Money born from crime carries only curses, and I chose to let it go. To my son, I leave one lesson. Wealth doesn't matter nearly as much as living decently. Never let money blind your conscience. Jack nods, eyes bright. My story ends not in revenge, but in a choice. To stop the cycle of hatred in my own generation so the children after me never have to pay for the sins of those who came before. I stand by the graves, wind in my hair, feeling complete peace. My life from darkness to light is now a lesson for myself alone, and I keep living, never looking back.